right. So it looks like Liz is first with school recording.
Yeah, so I thought this was pretty good, just because it's something that's facing a lot of people, and I think my favorite line from this article was that the person who wrote it is an employee of one of our three-letter agencies.
Oh,
She said.
such agency.
She said, so I decided to apply my day job as the Civil Liberties and Privacy Officer at the U.S. National Security Agency to my parenting job, which I think is just sort of an awesome quote in and of itself. How often do you get to do that? But it makes a lot of good points in terms of the fact that a lot of the online school situations are getting a little crazy. And this doesn't really talk about some of the extremely crazy ones. Like I've heard about schools like getting a little overreaching in terms of policing what kids are doing. I read one story about where a school called the cops and sent cops to this poor kid's house because they said he wasn't like paying good enough attention during the Zoom lessons, which is
Wow.
totally
And I heard they arrested the parents because the kid didn't do their homework.
Right. I mean, it's just getting, dictating what they can wear and everything else. I mean, it's just a little bit insane. But in this case, the parent was talking about how a lot of classes are starting to be recorded. And that can have a lot of privacy implications, especially when, some people have multiple kids at home who are doing Zoom school at the same time.
Yep.
And, the parents can be home doing work too, and maybe you live in a really small apartment. And so, things happen throughout the day, especially when they're on Zoom for hours at a time. Things happen in the background. You've got a whole host of concerns, and then now they're starting to record these videos, and there hasn't been a lot of clarification on what's happening with them. Like, how are they being stored? What are they going to be used for later?
Yep.
Can you see the individual kids when they're being recorded? And just an interesting thing to pay attention to. I thought that some of the points that she made about how we can improve that situation were pretty good. Where, say, so maybe the videos are available for just a limited time, so people in the class can rewatch them if they need to, but they're not just up there and out there forever. Or maybe they implement some access controls so only kids in the class and their families can see them instead of everybody in the school. Stuff like that. And also having actual clear written policies so that everybody knows what's going to happen with that data.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm recording all my classes, but I think the students all know it and there hasn't been a problem, but they're adults. Children
Right.
is different. And, it's definitely an issue. I remember I was going to put a surveillance camera in the hacking lab years ago, and I decided I probably better not because there'd be all these issues.
People would freak out. Yeah, we talked about that. And I think the other difference is too, in our classes, students are free to turn off their cameras. It's not going to count against them if they don't want to attend in person or speak, because they can do that later. They can not speak at all if they don't want to. But kids in school oftentimes don't have that luxury of choice. It's compulsory for them to be sitting there on camera, answering questions or what have you.
Yeah, that's why I don't like high school and stuff. I mean, I like college where you treat people like adults. I don't argue with students about stuff. I don't try to force them to do it.
Right.
It just seems like prison to me. It seemed like prison to me when I was on the other end of it. I didn't appreciate that at all. I would appreciate something, I think, more like what I hear Montessori is like, where they just give you a project, you work on a project and do something. You should be doing something you want to do.
Right. And I mean, I think a lot of those stories that we were talking about at the start of this are sort of an indicator of how, you know, a lot of the way that our school system has been designed in this country as the first component in the, you know, school to prison or school to factory pipeline. And, you know, it's just meant to impose control and force obedience. And, you know, that's really not the best model to get a strong and intelligent population of people.
Yeah, I don't like it. I remember I was surprised when I had students from Asian countries who was take my class, and their idea of studying was to memorize every word in the book and then repeat it. And I'm like, you memorized every page in the chapter? And they did before the quiz. And that's what they were trained to do at their schools. And I said, man, that's not the way I learn at all. It's a very different idea of what learning is.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, so then we got SOC compliance. Well, this is important.
This is important, and for a lot of people, they don't know what the heck SOC is. So I found this guide, and I actually thought it was a nice, simple read in understanding what SOC 2 is, because there's different SOC levels. And this kind of covers what to do in pretty easy to understand terms, what to do to meet SOC 2 compliance.
Yeah, I've heard of this. I've heard this really is a big step forward. It really makes you a lot more secure. You're actually organized. You're not doing like the top 10 stupid things anymore if you're SOC compliant.
Yep. So yeah, I shared this because I think it's a good little blurb to share.
Yeah. And a lot of people complain that, you know, compliance isn't good enough to be secure. And well, it's a step.
Yeah. And anybody studying CISSP, I think this would have helped me better understand SOC 2.
Yeah. And, you know, it's just like people that say Security Plus doesn't mean you know anything. I said, well, it means something. It doesn't mean you're an expert, but it means something. It means you have a certain base knowledge.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. And we got this Tor vulnerability that people are freaking out about.
They're freaking out about it? They shouldn't be, because this has been known for a long time. Yeah, and this just goes over all the different types of Tor vulnerabilities that are known. Mm-hmm. The most obvious one is the God's Eye view, which is the top one they're talking about. And it's scroll down a little bit to the snake with the gun. Oh wait, no, maybe you scroll down too much. What's going on? Oh no, scroll down. Sorry. Scroll down. God's Eye view. There it is. Now you're in the right section. So the idea, So the idea is that if you can
understand this picture.
Yeah, I want to know what happened too.
It's a snake that ate a gun. So exactly what does that symbolize?
If you can know the whole thing, something. Anyway. Anyway, the idea is that if you can look at the entire Tor network at once, you can kind of figure out what's going on, who's going where, what's happening. You can figure out who's connected to an entry node and where where they're exiting to, and you can kind of spy on their traffic. Okay, but you would have to have like complete knowledge of the Tor network, and that's obnoxious. But you could say, well, what if you only know 90% or 80%? Well, okay, yeah, you can grab some information about that. And then what about 10%? Turns out, yeah, you could even do some of these same techniques with 10%. And if you have just one guard on the Tor relay, you can potentially spy on a person. And this has to do with two things. Basically, first of all, the connections within the Tor network are different than Tors going out of the network. So if you're connecting to an Onion site, that traffic is distinguishable from going to like Google or something. Mm-hmm. The second thing is you can, even if you can't decrypt the traffic, there are signs within the Tor network about who the user is and what they're going to based on duration of the connection. So if you're connected for 10 minutes to one site, you can use a single guard computer in the Tor network to figure out what you're visiting, essentially. So to imagine you have like perfect privacy because you're using the Tor network is not the case at all. And we all knew this. I mean, there have been cases where people have used Tor to do bad things and got caught. But it is interesting to see that you can do a lot of these huge attacks, which you would think would require complete knowledge of the Tor network with just a single machine.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, Tor makes you more private, but it's not perfect by any means.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think Tor accomplishes its design goal very much, which is so that American spies can send messages home. That was the plan. And all these people downloading porn and stuff are the background chatter for the spies to hide in. That was the justification for it when the Navy developed it. So.
Yeah.
Well, in that regard,
I would never use Tor because I have nothing to hide.
Oh. Now, I don't use Tor mostly because it's too damn slow, but.
Yeah.
That's true too.
And also, I've
never used Tor. I don't know what you're talking about.
Also, I'm incredibly boring, so I never really need to hide my stuff. I think I used it a couple times just to see if I could cheat on like an online poll, and you totally can. Every connection comes from a different IP address. But yeah. So anyway, I got usual nonsense. So the CDC is now thoroughly corrupt. Trump, this one is pretty amazing. They went and
President Trump taking on his CDC director. Confused and mistaken.
Yeah, the CDC just announced a couple of weeks ago that you should not bother testing people and who they've been in contact with anymore. Don't bother. You only test people who have symptoms, which is like crazy. We knew about to do that in March, and that's because Trump doesn't want to do the test, so the number will go down. And they just rammed it past all the CDC approval process. The doctors did not approve on it and went on the CDC website and went out with their name. And they say when they read it, it's using the wrong technical terms for medical treatments because it was written by a politician and not a doctor.
Yep.
And this, I would resign if I was at the CDC. Well, we're obviously just the Pravda now, publishing political propaganda that is lies, and we're not a scientific agency, which seems to be true of all medical agencies in the government now. And anyway, it's pretty shocking. And this guy, who actually has gotten a lot of, this guy here, who the head of the CDC, has gotten a lot of criticism for not being tough enough, but he went to Congress and he said very smart things. He said, a mask will protect you more than this vaccine is gonna. If you wear this mask, it protects you like 95%, and the vaccine's probably only going to protect you like 50 or 70%. So we really should just tell people to wear masks. And we could get this under control now the way every other nation did. We don't even need to wait for a vaccine. And Trump came down and said, that's all wrong. I don't want any of that happening. We're going to promise them to have a vaccine in the next couple of weeks so I can get the election. And they shouldn't wear masks. That's just garbage. And he ordered him to say that. And
the vaccine trials are not going great either.
Yeah, well, one of them had side effects, I know, but there's like 15 of them. The Chinese say they've got one that works. The Russians say they've got one that works, but no one believes them. But anyway, it's pretty extreme. And he did not exactly say what Trump told him to say. He said some careful thing, which kind of still says what he was saying. So it looks like he might have finally grown a backbone. They might have finally hit a limit to how much he's willing to completely destroy his scientific credibility to please Trump, which means he'll be fired, I guess, and replaced by someone from Fox News. Probably Atlas. But anyway, it's just amazing. And I heard an interview with a British politician who said that he thinks that even in another term, Trump couldn't pull out of NATO because the other Republicans would stop him. I say, he does not understand how much the Republicans do nothing in America. Trump can do anything. Because in Britain, he thinks he's like the leader of a coalition in Parliament. And there are people underneath him that actually have like will and judgment, but that is not true. There are no longer any checks and balances on him. He just does anything, no matter how ridiculous, and nobody dares to stop him. So it is really shocking to watch. Anyway, so something happened at the Department of Interior. Oh, the security audit. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So these guys could do with a little bit of compliance auditing. They had some penetration testing done, and that did not go well for the government. Surprise, surprise, they were vulnerable to compromise on multiple fronts, and apparently could have gone even further, but as is typical, they ran into some bureaucratic roadblocks and couldn't really carry out the full penetration tests to its fullest extent. This isn't surprising news, but it's just kind of it's kind of interesting to see that it's business as usual. And I mean, they use some pretty darn basic attacks, use it like an evil twin attack where they got network credentials and stuff like that, where it was just really easy for them to wreak havoc in these federal offices.
Yeah, and from their description of the weakness, it sounds like these guys were not even SOC compliant.
No, that's why I say they could do with a little dose of compliance themselves.
Yeah. Well, I remember a few years ago, they defined the official standards for agencies and they started auditing them. And the first time, like 98% of them failed. Next time, 95% of them failed, because they know now have defined what you should do, but they don't have a way to do it yet.
Right.
Yeah. And then server side.
Server-side evasion. I read this and went, oh, this is interesting. So essentially what they're doing, normally something like an HTTP GET request gets censored during the push hack. What they're doing in one of their like 11 different ways to evade things like the Chinese firewall is to send GETs within a SYNAC.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I know it used to be all you had to do was ignore ACKs because the Chinese firewall would just use an ACK to cancel a reset. Had to ignore reset packets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is just one of 11 ways that they found, and they have the tool available on GitHub to play with. There's the picture of them sending the gets within a syntax.
Neat. Yeah, that's cool. You can make a server that is hard to block.
Yep.
I thought of that, but then I thought, the people at the other end will get in trouble. You could argue whether you really want to be doing that, but anyway.
Right.
It is an interesting technical issue. And what are you going to do with a custom Mimikatz? Get past antivirus?
Antivirus. So this is interesting because I've actually done this before. In fact, specifically with Mimikatz, because it's a useful tool when you're penetration testing or doing any sort of security assessment on Windows boxes. But of course, antivirus is going to pick it up. It's going to say, this is garbage, a hacking tool, goodbye. And so you got to figure out a way to get around it.
Oh, this is great. They reported Mimikatz that it contains a virus.
Yes.
You have a virus in your code, you bad people. Well.
yes, exactly. So if you put Mimikatz on a corporate machine that has all the standard controls for antivirus, it's going to go nuts and delete it. And I really dislike antivirus software. It has its purpose, but it cannot distinguish between legitimate, assessment tools versus malware. So you have a problem. But of course, I'm not going to say it's trivial to bypass, but it's time intensive. But it's definitely possible. It's just doesn't require rocket science, and you just have to change it enough so it looks different. And what this goes through is it goes through basically the strings within a file, and it focuses mainly on how you can change those strings, find those strings, and create a new signature by essentially running sed on a executable. I did the same thing. I usually take it a step further. I think it's also important to find an obscure compiler and recompile the sections of code using the obscure compiler to make it look completely different. And of course, get rid of the strings. And you can also get rid of a lot of programs, especially Mimikatz, contain a lot of stuff you don't need. So getting rid of the stuff you don't need, and you can make it look a lot different. What they don't mention is don't use things like UPX and tools of that nature where you're editing the executable directly, because there are signatures for those too. So all you want to do is just make your own executable, change the strings. Like I said, you can use a different compiler. Yeah. That's always a good idea. There was one thing in this article that I found useful, and there's a command you can run in Windows that will check to see if it is check to see if a file is going to get picked up by Defender. It's called defendercheck.exe.
Oh, yeah. You don't have to use VirusTotal.
No.
Good.
And that's the other thing too, is I don't want to use virus troller, because then you're sending out the stuff you don't want found out to the place where it gets found out. So
Well, you could just send a hash up. That's how you usually avoid that.
yeah, but the thing is that antivirus don't use hashes, or I mean your custom binaries. The hashes are of course going to be different from anything else known before.
Oh, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean you'd have to send out the whole thing, and it's like,
Yeah.
no, I want to keep it secret. It's security through obscurity. It's great. What could go wrong?
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Neat. But first, of course, you have to be able to compile it from source.
Right.
Yeah.
And most of these tools do have source code available. Although this does not require just changing the strings in the program does not require compiling from source. You can do that with sed.
And after that, it looks different when you run it, right? All the text is different.
All the text is different. You get rid of the unique strings. Although I don't think that's enough to get past a lot of antivirus. They're saying that it is.
Yeah. Yeah. We can try it and see.
But yeah, I imagine there's certain blocks of code and stuff that they can also do signatures on.
That's what they should be doing. But yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You know, this I thought was very interesting. Somebody sent me this. And this is the electric tower that started the fire that killed all the people in Paradise. And if you look at this tower, there's an insulator here, and this one here is broken and it's fallen down. And that's what caused it to short and to spray molten aluminum around and start the fire. And so you look to see what caused this. And if you take a look at this thing, it's got a hook, and it's a C hook. It's supposed to hold it up by being hooked like that. But if you look at the one that fell down, it snapped right off. And you can see from these scrape lines that it's been blowing in the wind, rotating loosely until it sort of ground through. And so the question is, what caused that? And that was this fire that killed people and burned down a whole city and such. And so the point is, this thing had been sitting there for 97 years. They built it 100 years ago. There are no records. Apparently, it had already worn through the first platform holding it together, and they'd replaced it with a second bracket. But there are no records of when that would happen, because PG&E didn't even keep any records. So apparently, they put these things up using questionable metal and questionable methods from 100 years ago, and they just sit up there carrying like 115,000 volts forever until something finally breaks and falls down. So it is pretty exciting to read about, pretty interesting. And this is, remember PG&E declared bankruptcy and reorganized because they said they could not possibly afford to improve their stuff. It would be too much bother. So now they're still running. They're like back from bankruptcy. I know people that work there, but I don't know. It's pretty scary. This is one of the things Trump ran on, was we're going to do something about the broken infrastructure, and so did Obama, but none of them ever do it. That's why they've been joking. Every week is supposed to be infrastructure week. There's a whole lot of old stuff in America that's falling apart that we really need to fix.
Well, and I mean, this is really on PG&E too, because they've raked in record profits over the past 3 years, but they haven't been rolling any of that back into upgrading or maintaining the infrastructure. And we see that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is a huge job, of course, to go through all that miles of stuff and update it, but we really need to do that.
It is, and also, not for nothing, but deregulation, utility deregulation really isn't working out so hot.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we got whatever this one is, Fine Send. This is yours.
Yeah. So I thought this was kind of interesting. There's not a lot of, I couldn't find a lot of additional info for this, but essentially the government tried to get out in front of the government. It's the Treasury's financial crimes division, and they tried to get out in front of what is apparently going to be multiple news outlets covering a story about how the suspicious activity records were leaked, suspicious activity reports, which anytime you make a deposit that's over $10,000, or even like aggregate deposits that equal 10 grand, or a whole host of things. Your bank has to send a report to this agency so that it gets flagged, and they look and make sure you're not like laundering drug money or something crazy like that through your bank. And apparently they weren't keeping too good a control over those the records in that database, because it sounds like there was a major breach. So I thought it was kind of interesting that I hadn't seen a situation like this where they're like, oh well, be prepared to hear a lot of stories about this in the future.
Yeah, this reminds me of WikiLeaks when it started. They had an entire dump of major Bank of America, whole hard drive, all full of financial crimes. But the second in command at WikiLeaks got so mad at Julian Assange that he deleted it.
Wow.
He said, I don't trust Julian Assange with this data, and deleted it. So he didn't get to leak it all. But apparently, the banks are doing all sorts of shady stuff, and they do get caught now and then.
Well, and this seems like it's more of a federal problem, because they said that the official government statement was that we're aware that various media outlets are going to publish this series of articles based on this breach. And we just want to reiterate that it's a crime to disclose this reports and these other sensitive government documents.
That makes it sound like it's a deliberate leak, not a hack.
Yeah, that could be too. That could be too.
Yeah, well, that's certainly true. We have an awful lot of whistleblowers now that the government corruption is getting so bad. But
this was a couple of weeks ago, and they haven't. I wasn't able to find any news stories since then, so it's going to be interesting. I'm going to be interested to see what comes out of this. Yeah, that's what you really need reporters for. They need to boil this down to something you can understand.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what went wrong with WikiLeaks. They dumped like 100 megabytes of junk, and what does this mean? You really need someone to dig through it and tell you what it means. Gigabytes too. Anyway, so. All right, and this is, I guess we're here, the Cloudflare. This sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, Cloudflare wants to team up with the Wayback Machine and basically be the hosts for Wayback.
Nice.
That way, you search for anything that gets offline, you'll still be able to get to it, because thanks, Cloudflare.
It makes a lot of sense. I went to tour to visit the company that runs DNS, their name I forget, and I saw the Wayback Machine. They took us in their server room, and they had like a room full of servers, and there were like 2 servers on the rack, and they said, that's it right there. That's the Wayback Machine. That's the whole thing. And I'm like, And I'd be a lot more comforted thing knowing it's like a Cloudflare, it's on 20 different data centers, it's backed up, it's redundant. That's what I was sort of hoping it would be, not like 2 servers that look like something you could have on your desk.
Yeah, that's a little scary. But yeah, so Cloudflare wants to team up.
Yep.
I think that's good news.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. And Kaitlyn has got memfuck.
Yes. So this user or this writer kind of buries the lead, and I'll get to that in a second. So the idea is that we're going to be doing some normal command injection on a 32-bit process in Windows. And so you do the normal injection, and you essentially start off by unmapping the entire 32-bit application's address space. And then what you can do is you can start injecting some exception handlers. And so essentially what you're going to end up doing is those exception handlers are going to get handled by the WoW64 DLLs.
Yep.
And what ends up happening is you have a 32-bit application running in Windows. You unmap all the address space. You inject some custom code and initiate an exception handling event. And suddenly now you're running 64-bit code. That is cool. And like I said, the author kind of buries the lead in this. Doesn't get to the fact that you're running 64-bit code in a 32-bit application until way down lower. But no, that is an awesome technique for code injection, because now you can take any application, even a 32-bit one, and get full 64-bit address space out of it.
Yeah, this looks very interesting. I should probably add this to like the malware analysis class.
Yeah, and the user, Wintel, Wininternal, they're going by, is looking for a job. And if anyone deserves some work, this person seems to be on the right track to becoming a big InfoSec person. So
I need that. I actually, because my kernel mode rootkits are too out of date. I need like another kernel project for my class.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you're doing a lot of weird stuff with the memory. Like I said, you unmap everything, and then you trigger exception handling, and you can suddenly start calling 64-bit code.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so this one I've been hearing about, I didn't know it was going to happen. So Trump is now going to bar TikTok and WeChat. So you can't download them anymore because they're so afraid of the data going to China. And the thing that Scott Galloway said about this, what I saw is right, is how can they do this? There used to be a thing called the free market. And there used to be one of our political parties that was actually in favor of the free market. How can you the government declare that you must sell to an American company, and it must be one that is my crony, or I'll block you, which is what it is, blackmail. And are there real national security concerns for people having TikTok on their phones? I mean, you might as well block all imports from China. That's why this is pretty shocking to me. I thought it was a bluff. And what Scott Galloway said, which I thought is right, is if they try to do it, you'll just be able to sue, and they will discover that the president does not have the authority to do this in America. I didn't think he did. This is, we used to be very proud of the fact that we don't use our government to manipulate companies doing business here. This is what we complain China isn't being fair, but we're fair here. It's, I'm surprised that he's just doing this, and I'm being more surprised if he gets away with it. It's, I thought, and on top of that, there was supposedly a deal to prevent this with Oracle. So I'm very unclear. I assume this is some kind of bluff and they're going to back down. I don't know. But apparently on Monday, you're not going to be able to get TikTok anymore. If you have it, you can use it, but you won't be able to update it. No new users can get it. So I'm sure we're going to hear more about this. It's hard to believe that's really going to continue to happen at face value.
Right. I assume it'll get blocked because, that's...
I would think so. It seems like it's got to be blatantly illegal. And then Liz had this one where the cyber fraud prevention startup is committing fraud.
Yeah, I had to include this one just because it's pretty funny to me. Just because I guess, I guess it's illegal to practice your own craft now.
Well, what was the anti-fraud service? So is this one of those credit monitoring services or what?
Well, all that it said was that it was a software as a service provider that they were supposed to essentially do like behavioral analytics and then let the companies know that there was going to be some kind of risk. So to me, I thought when I read this was like, oh, okay, so you're looking for insider threats and spying on your employees.
Yeah, I'm pretty suspicious of all this behavior analytics stuff. It makes you just think of witch sniffers,
Yeah, me too. But it's becoming increasingly popular in the corporate world, which, we'll see how that turns out. Hey, this guy, this guy's a pretty good example of, being, you just never know. What you're getting into as a company. And a lot of the time too, like these corporations will buy these products without doing any kind of like vetting or due diligence. And so, you could be buying your, fraud prevention software from a cyber fraud kingpin.
Yeah, I realize I'm just an amateur, but I would think the way to prevent insider threats would be to actually take care of your employees so they're happy to work there. And then they wouldn't stab you in the back maybe, but.
Okay, hippie.
I know, that's just radical, Sam.
I know. It's like we were talking earlier about, the way to stop students from doing bad stuff is to make them actually have fun in the course instead of like forcing them to sit in a Zoom and.
Yep.
If they actually want to learn this stuff, then you don't have to like hit them with a whip all the time to keep them moving. Anyway, all right. Any more comments? All right, I'll stop this recording.